our field is open to interpretation. And sometimes it just takes a little shift in the perspective to view all of the research in a different light. And that's what I think the system has done. And when you get to the strength course, you're going to see that, oh yeah, when I think of it from the perspective of the joint, instead of thinking of my strength training from the perspective of the external movement emergent that I was going for, the squat, the deadlift, the bicep curl, when you think about what you're doing from the perspective of yourself and how your nervous system cultivates, creates, and nurtures movements, all of a sudden the things that you were doing in the external environment don't make sense anymore, because you realize that they're not affecting the internal environment in ways that you thought they were. And training has gone on for so long with this perspective that I, as a trainer, am going to watch you as the client do this movement, and I, as the trainer, am going to use my conscious thoughts to confine the variables of your movement such that I am going to, put your knee running along this exact path because I want it to do so, right? As if I am the person who is creating the motions in you. And that's the perspective problem. I'm not creating the motions. I'm seeing what your internal environment created. And as soon as you take that into account, you go, oh, I see. So my job is not to please my coach and to get the repetition that I wanted or the display of the external accumulation of the movement that I display. The goal is to cultivate the internal environment to make all external displays improve. And as soon as you do that, the last strength and conditioning article that you read, the result changes. It changes completely. I'll give you a good example. It's often said that if you go into the research and you say, do different exercises cause different adaptations in the person? For example, incline bench versus decline bench versus flat bench versus overhead press versus this versus that. I think people would agree generally the result of that literature search would tell you that it depends. So the specificity of an angle of motion, it depends. In this particular study, it said that there is a difference. In this study, it said there isn't a difference. The difference is more perceptible in the chest versus the back muscles versus the shoulder. So you will see these differences. But all of these studies, if you put them all together, there's one major thing that no one is considering. And that is the internal control of the people who they were using in their research studies. Such that when I go to a bench press, I go to a machine bench, and I use that machine bench, anybody who understands how the body functions should understand that when I use that machine and you use that machine, the result isn't necessarily going to be the same, if only from the fact that you're you and I'm me. Does that make sense? So in other words, of course, in some people, you're going to find more differences. Just going to plug my battery in the result of a particular stimulus, but that might be because that person has more control over themselves. That might be because the person has more access to themselves, right? I was just on the internet looking at some posts, and somebody made up a good point about hips and glutes. I don't know if you saw that point, but the person was alluding to the fact that if you want more glutes, then it's going to depend on how much access you have to your hip, right? So people are looking on, I need the best glute exercises. No, you need the best exercises for Mitch that is going to make the other exercises do the most for Mitch, right? So again, it's a complete perspective change, because in that regard, I'm no longer concerned as to whether or not the incline bench is going to be different than the decline bench. What I'm most concerned with is, can I bring a different Mitch to every training session? Because if I can continuously cultivate better capacities in Mitch, then the external exercises take care of themselves. So now the strength course, what that does is it opens up an entire opportunity to take all of the literature ever written about strength and cultivation and to reinterpret it in a way that will allow you to make specific changes in the person in front of you. And the great thing is that because we've been doing FRS now for over 10 years, we have almost all of the inputs that would be necessary in order to make specific internal changes in that person. So again, it's a scenario where the course made itself just by focusing the FRS microscope at a different topic.